Okay, I just want to give you now an overview of many of the things that we've covered in the first three segments of this module before we get into our case studies. So you'll remember we talked about the dimensions of diversity, and that while ethnicity and race are an aspect of diversity, there are so many other things that contribute towards our diversity, such as our age, our sex, our geographic location, marital status, physical ability, recreational habits, work location, on and on and on and on. We're very complex, and there's so many ways that we can connect with coworkers. Remember that I came forward with my own personal theory that connection equals job security. And if we can make connections with people, either by finding common ground or showing interest in how they are different, I really believe that establishes us and gives us more opportunity in the workplace. We also asked the question, do fish know that water exists? And the reason why we were talking about that is just to raise our awareness that we are moving through culture. There's many aspects of our life that are cultural, and we don't necessarily know it because we are so immersed in it. And so then when we run into situations where there is a different culture, and it could be because of someone's age, they come from a different company, they come from a different country, so many things, we can run into conflict situations because we assume that what we do is normal, it's common sense, when really it is two cultures coming into contact with each other. And I think just having that awareness is very helpful. We talked about the 4 levels of culture: ethnic, group, organizational, and individual. And particularly in the workplace, being aware that people from different cultures, they will bring in different perspectives. That actually is a really good thing. But there's also potential for misunderstanding, and so that's why the next module on communication will be really important for us to explore. Also, that the organizational culture, that companies that we have worked at in the past have a different culture, and if we come in with the expectation that it's going to be similar, that can create problems. And also individual culture, that getting to know people as individuals and not just going, oh, I've worked with Métis people before, so now I know how to work with this person who says they are Métis. It's a starting point, but really we have to get to know people on an individual level. We also compared culture to an iceberg, and that is because as large as an iceberg is, if we had that privilege of seeing one, really only 10% is above the waterline. And so the huge majority of the iceberg is below the waterline. Same thing with culture. If you go to a cultural event such as a folklorama event, and you go to a pavilion on Chinese culture, you will get to see them dance, you will get to taste their food. What you see is really just above the waterline. And if you are working with a Chinese coworker, 90% of who they are culturally is below the waterline. And so we really have to get to know each other and also get to know what's invisible for us, get to know ourselves better, increase that self-awareness. I also showed the next picture of the iceberg to show that you can have 2 coworkers with completely opposite behaviors and have the exact same value underneath. We also talked about values, those things that are important to us, and you heard Mary and I have a number of discussions on different elements of workplace values. And I hope that you're coming away thinking that people can be on one extreme or on the other extreme of the values spectrum, as far as, so for example, some people may think it's really important that you show respect to people in higher positions, and other people will say, no, we should be treating everybody the same. There really isn't a right or wrong, but it's important that we understand our own values. We bring that to a conscious level, like the Johari window, like we talked about that. And then also understand the values of the organization so that we can make any kind of adjustment in order to be successful there, because there is no company that has a perfect values match for us. There will be some adjustment. Also keeping in mind that if the values are completely opposite, we are going to be very stressed and unhappy at that workplace, but not to just quit on the spot, but to be, because it's easier to get a job if you already have a job. So just to be looking for one on the side, then giving your 2 weeks notice. This transition will be much better for everybody, including yourself. We also looked at this picture in the orientation and then revisited it in a different segment. That when it comes to culture, we look at the world through our own filter, and we have first impressions of people through that filter, and we can't help it. And that's fine. The thing is just to keep in mind that our perspective may be incorrect. So if we're working with a coworker and we have this, our first impression of them is quite negative, it might be just our own cultural filter. So just to give you an example of that, a participant in one of my workshops said that she was working with people from another culture, and they typically talk quite loud. It seemed like they were yelling at each other all the time. And then she realized that that this was normal. So then she came to the conclusion it's normal for them to be rude with each other. But then I suggested that she take it to the next level, that it may not be normal for them to be rude at each other, with each other. It may be just that they speak at a higher volume when they're being friendly with each other in that culture. So that takes me to a point that I haven't brought up yet, and that is that many things culturally are not right, not wrong, just different. But the tricky thing is that different feels wrong unless we challenge our thinking. So, for example, if you are working with a coworker who wears a turban, your first instinct, if it's different for you, if that's not part of your culture, it might feel wrong. But when you take time to think about it, you might go, really, what is the difference in our workplace as long as the person can work safely? It is an example of not right, not wrong, just different. And this can save us so much potential conflict that can go awry in the workplace. And the last point I want to review is the stages of group development. The forming, storming, norming, and performing. And just to recognize that this is normal in any workplace. There's going to be that awkward time of first impressions, and then there's going to be some conflict that comes out of that. And if you keep going and stick with it, you will get into norming and then ultimately get into performing. And when you answered the question for yourself about how to help yourself get through the stages, I hope that you were exploring things such as really observing and watching your environment, reading policies over very closely, because that can give you some real hints about how to get through the stages, asking questions, finding somebody who can be like a buddy for you is also very helpful.